And also it's interesting because Wolves have been so good against the top six this season. I mean, if you include the FA Cup games, they've either beaten or drawn with each member of the top six, which no one else comes close to it. So they really are the giant killers of this season. So for City to sort of swat them aside so comfortably, it was quite a menacing statement, I think, and I'm sure over in Liverpool they were a little bit nervy about that.
Yeah, and a menacing set of results from them, although they haven't played Premier League opposition in 2 of the last 3. But they've scored 7, they scored 9, and now 3. I mean, this is a team that's now gelling together perfectly. And what a response to the Liverpool defeat.
Yeah, absolutely. And that just shows the power of City, really. That if they play any team that is kind of a notch below their level, they will be punished. I was laughing when they beat Burton 9-0. People saying, "Oh, it's disrespectful to." So, well, but how can you tell players just to turn it on and turn it off? You just can't do, can you? No. And people say, "Oh, well, you know, they didn't need to win 9-0. 6 would have been enough. They were in the Carabao Cup final anyway." Blah blah. But you know, the power of this City team is that they will destroy teams, and once they've got you on the rack, you've had it.
You can always tell that Pep was, maybe he was trying to make a point in the wake of those people who were saying they should have taken the foot off the gas against the sides such as Rotherham and Burton, because his post-match comments yesterday was that he loved the aggressive nature of his players. So there's no let-up as far as he's concerned.
No, and you can imagine how much confidence it would give a team to go out and beat someone 9-0, for example. For example, Gabriel Jesus is a great example of, in the last few weeks, he's really found his form again after quite a difficult 2018, really. His whole year was quite difficult, and he really struggled for form. He got injured on New Year's Day at Palace and never quite got back to his best. And he was obviously the first choice ahead of Aguero for a decent part of the previous season. So him coming back in now, scoring a lot of goals, even if it is against lesser opposition, even in the cup games, that must give him so much confidence. And you can see last night he was absolutely flying. So you can see why Pep wants his players to really push and be aggressive and go for teams, because it's going to make them feel so much more confident when it comes to those big matches.
Also, those players that are in the team, if they don't press on in games and deliver what Guardiola wants, there's such a galaxy of talent there that you risk losing your place if you don't sort of do really what the manager wants you to. And the case in point is De Bruyne, who is struggling to get a start at the moment in games in the Premier League because of the depth of the talent and the fact that Guardiola, for all his love of players like De Bruyne, if there's somebody in front of De Bruyne who is doing the business for him, they stay in the team. And that's a great thing for a manager to, well, it's a great thing for players to know in the dressing room that if they do deliver what the manager wants, they will stay in the team and they won't be pushed out because there's a bigger name waiting.
Just round the corner
to come in.
Yeah, I am enjoying seeing Gabriel Jesus' resurgence. As you mentioned, he's been out of form. The only thing he had to show for it this season was the hat-trick against Shakhtar Donetsk. That's right. But 7 goals in the last 3 games has taken his tally for the campaign to 15 in all competitions. And I just like, because not only is he young, and you've got to remember he's only 21 or thereabouts, but the difference having his mum here, for that prolonged stay. And, his goal celebration.
That's a goal celebration with a phone.
Because, that means a lot to him. And even whilst he came back recently, it coincided with him scoring all the goals. It really did lift him.
I do think we forget sometimes that this is a 21-year-old kid who's come across from Brazil, from a whole different culture, whole other side of the world. And yes, he gets paid a shed load of money, but frankly, he's still a bloke who needs his mum sometimes. He needs his family around him.
And not afraid to admit it.
Yeah, I admire that. He came out and said, I needed my family around me, and now they're here. I feel better, feel more comfortable. It's interesting how that's sort of had such an impact on his game already, which is to show sort of the emotional side of football and how those things that we don't always talk about really do actually matter, I think.
Steve?
I mean, clubs have they invest a lot of money to buy players. So really, you have to give them the emotional support as well. It's not just spending the money to buy a player, giving him a huge wage and say, right, go and do it. There are a whole lot more to it than that. And that's the part of the game that maybe the spectators, the public, don't really see. The emotional, the human side of the game. And in Guardiola, although he has very high standards and, if you drop below that, then you're not in the team. He is a human man as well, and he was saying, I remember being at City 2 or 3 weeks ago, in his press conference, he was saying that, players like Jesus, young guys, they do need their family around him.
Yeah, well, it was Jesus continuing his fine goal-scoring form, and Kevin De Bruyne continuing to stake a claim for more first-team football after his spell on the sidelines. It shows the strength and depth at City. But James Ducker of The Telegraph was writing earlier this week about how Pep Guardiola has admitted that City do face a serious battle, though, trying to find the next Fernandinho. Because if anything, that's his only one weakness, is an alternative as for a defensive midfielder. He fears, it says here, of losing out to Barcelona for Ajax midfielder Frankie de Jong. Now, this is interesting. They have been linked with Ruben Neves, but he's not of that ilk. But with Pep saying he's not going to buy in the January transfer window, we've already seen this season could well be decided on fine margins. The way Liverpool came unstuck to Manchester City despite that goal line clearance. And, of course, at the weekend, United against Tottenham. It could have gone either way at the end. If Pep doesn't buy a defensive midfielder alternative to Fernandinho this season, could that eventually cost him the title, do you think?
I think so. I think we spoke for so long in this season saying, well, if Fernandinho is lost or gets injured or suspended, that might be a problem. And then that happened to be the case. He was missing for the 2 games they lost against Leicester and against Palace, of course. And that showed quickly how big a deal it is to lose him. Call me a cynic, but I think if an option came up in January to replace or to find a backup for Fernandinho, who is 34 now and is going to need replacing sooner rather than later, I can't see City withholding their chequebook if it means coming out in January. But obviously the one they wanted was Jorginho, who went to Chelsea and isn't having the best of times right now. But that was the obvious replacement in Pep's eyes. But there are very few players who can sort of tick all those boxes where you've got to be so technically proficient, but also so defensively minded and attuned to what Pep wants, which is a really hard thing to find.
Yeah. The only thing I would say is that he's such a great planner, Guardiola, and he has with him, behind him, that Soriano and Begiristan, who were at Barcelona at the same time in, behind the scenes capacity, chief exec and director of football. They plan meticulously, City. I don't think they knee-jerk. And I think if they can't get the man they want, which clearly is Frankie de Jong, he's the player I think they've identified as the man that can do that job. I don't think, particularly in January, they'll go and spend money, because if you think they bring somebody from abroad it'll take time for them to settle. It'll time for them to get used to Pep's style, the style of the players around him. You're asking a lot of somebody to slip seamlessly into a Fernandinho role. I admit it's a problem.
Because they are just one injury away.
But they are
from a major headache.
But he's such a unique player in the way he plays, and his influence on that team is so big that I don't think there's another Fernandinho out there that could just come in and do that role.
That's why I suppose it makes sense to get them now and then give them 6 months until the end of the season to learn from Fernandinho and to see how he does it. We saw that with Laporte last year, arrived in January, in and out of the team a bit, played a bit of left back, wasn't always the key man. And this season, from day one, he's pretty much been there.
To play catch up to Liverpool. Paul Joyce, in the last couple of hours, has revealed that Trent Alexander-Arnold is now to miss the next 4 weeks for Liverpool. The right back suffered an injury in the tight win against Brighton at the weekend. So how significant now is this perhaps for Jurgen Klopp?
That feels like a really major blow, particularly with Joe Gomez also out for a few more weeks and Joel Matip out. They had Fabinho playing at centre-back this weekend, so the defence is already a little bit stretched as it is. And as you talk about, we talk about fine margins. Someone who's not used to playing right back, and they just loaned out Nathaniel Klein as well. That must feel like the timing of that is extremely unfortunate. And you look at it and think they're now looking a little bit stretched at the back, which is where they've been so solid this season. I suppose the saving grace would be, as long as we've got Van Dijk, they'll think, as long as we've got Van Dijk, we should be solid, because no matter who plays alongside him, they seem to play well. Like we saw Fabinho this weekend, but because of Van Dijk's presence, anyone within his sort of...
I was going to say, does that relate to the whole back four or just the two in the middle?
It seems to only affect the centre-backs. Lovren's been better when he's played alongside Van Dijk. Fabinho was terrific at the weekend.
He'll be grateful that he's got a player like James Milner in there, because...
he can play at both full-back
Milner
roles.
could play right back in an emergency. He wouldn't want to do it for a prolonged spell.
He's already done it this season, hasn't he?
Yeah, so he could play there. But you do get the feeling with Liverpool, they've had such a serene run. Nothing really has gone wrong to derail this charge for their first title in 29 years up till Christmas. But now they're beginning to pick up a few injuries. And I think this title race is so tight that fine margins will determine We've already seen Harry Kane obviously injured. You know, that's a blow for Tottenham. So this is a blow for Liverpool, make no mistake.
What is interesting about this one is he sustained the injury in the warm-up before the game. We covered this at the weekend. And he did eventually say to his teammates, I'm fit to start. I just wonder whether Klopp is a little bit regretful that he carried on playing him, knowing that there was a slight doubt there. But in that opening paragraph, it also mentions Gino Wijnaldum has a concern over his fitness. Again, another knee injury against Brighton. Yeah. I mean, this is another player who, a bit like Trent, has had a stellar first half of the campaign.
Exactly, and he's brought so much to that team in terms of energy and physicality. And I think a lot of people probably thought in the summer when they signed Fabinho and signed Naby Keita that Wijnaldum would be a substitute at best for much of the season, but he's really come on leaps and bounds. You talk about, well, if Milner goes to right back, that leaves a gap in midfield, and then if Wijnaldum's not there, you're suddenly relying on Keita, who's not had a great start to his life in Liverpool.
Yeah.
Someone like Keita, or even Fabinho if he's not playing centre-back. And these are two new guys. Fabinho's been very good, of course, but that pressure on them is suddenly really ramping up, and Liverpool have been so good this season at spreading the load, and that's going to become harder and harder.
I think City are better equipped than Liverpool to ride
these little niggles,
certain injury problems.
Yeah.
Look, if De Bruyne can't get back in the team, that shows you how strong they are.
No, it certainly does. Let's just dig beneath the surface of Liverpool's win over Brighton at the weekend, because it was imperative in a way that they got back to winning ways. Many people will say that defeat, to Wolves in the Cup and then to Manchester City might highlight more than just a mini blip. Nick Ames of the ESPN says the game won't live long in the memory, but it could well be their most significant. He says in any title-winning season, there are games that end up being almost forgotten. Staging posts, if you like, along the road that offer essential nourishment, but nothing in the way of vivid scenery. Should Liverpool see the job through in May, this laborious win over an excellently drilled Brighton side will only merit a few seconds of the highlight reel. It'll not matter one bit, because these may prove to be their most important 3 points of the entire campaign.
It's interesting because, obviously, for the first few months of the season, Liverpool were quite workmanlike, and they were grinding out quite a few 1-0 wins and basing it on a solid defence, which is very much not what we've grown used to with Jurgen Klopp. Then in December and in November, they started to let loose a bit. They became more free-flowing, more like Liverpool we come to recognise in the last 2 or 3 seasons. The last 2 games recently, and the pressure was clearly on this, and Klopp now has the capability to say, right, first things first, we defend. And they went back to how they were at the start of the season against Brighton.
Because Klopp did say afterwards, we're not the Harlem Globetrotters.
Exactly. You can't expect us to win 5-0 every week, is the message he'll be sending out. Because they were doing that in December. They were absolutely scoring goals from all over the place. Whereas when the pressure comes on, they now can go, right, first things first, we defend, we set up deep, we set up strong and compact, and we make sure we don't concede a goal. And with Van Dijk in the team, you can do that, which is what they haven't been able to do in previous seasons.
You can just see what it meant to the Liverpool players at the time. Just a tight win against Brighton. It doesn't matter really. The 3 points are in the bag, but it's the nature of the win, and I suppose the overall importance of it in the scheme of things.
Well, they're playing with no safety net, are they? They have no safety net, because if they lose a game, City are right on them, and you would in a straight fight to the end of the season, at a level point, you would say City would probably make the line first. But that's why that Klopp is celebrating every win, even if it's 1-0, even if it's ugly, dirty, scrappy. That's as good a win for him as playing expansive football and winning 3-0.
Connor Dunn of the Liverpool Echo observed something that was not been hugely evident in Liverpool's game, particularly this season or the last couple of seasons. He said a use of the dark arts by Liverpool, something that you'd normally associate with Manchester City. He said when Mohamed Salah celebrated his penalty, he was stood in front of the Liverpool supporters for so long after the goal that Brighton had lined up and were ready to restart as Salah sauntered towards the Reds' own half. There were slower goal kicks from Alisson and time spent with the ball nearly in hand as he made the Brighton attackers come close before he'd pick it up. And finally, he says, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson took the pace out of the game when taking their throw-ins and free kicks, and it was a similar story with corners and other players on the pitch as well. He footnotes all of this by saying, look, Liverpool have been top of the Fair Play League because they do a point system, don't they, with yellow and red cards. They've been top of that table for the last 2 full seasons and are currently top now as well of this campaign. So this is something that might be just creeping in. Are they just being a bit more wiser? Because he says at the end of the article, nice teams don't necessarily make championship-winning teams.
I think you absolutely need that to have those, to ride these sorts of games when it's tight and it's edgy, and you need to waste a few minutes here and there. And that's something that I think Liverpool will become more sort of world-wise as they go through this season. And we saw at the start of the campaign how they were becoming a bit more, okay, right, if the ball needs to be in the corner flag for a bit, we'll put it there. And a bit more sort of cynical and practical in that sense. And I think City have absolutely got that. We spoke a lot about tactical fouls they make and how important someone like Fernandinho is on that. But the whole squad gets involved with it. I know Guardiola doesn't particularly like talking about that, but it's absolutely a part of their game. And that's something that I think Klopp doesn't necessarily think about first and foremost, but Liverpool need to definitely add that to their game, and they certainly are.
Them being streetwise, is it something you've noticed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, the desire for a Premier League title, a first Premier League title on Merseyside is just, the expectation's unbelievable. And that club cannot wait to win a first Premier League title. So I suspect that whatever philosophies Jurgen Klopp might have, whatever his dream way of playing might be, forget that. He'll do absolutely, utterly anything. If they played like, for instance, the Leeds team of the 70s, who used to grind out results and would absolutely resort to every dirty trick in the book to get over the line, I suspect that's what Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool would do now to win that title, because it's gone on so long that playing pretty football, I think, is irrelevant, really. That they just need to win that title. And I think the perception last season was that Liverpool were too nice.
I think the question will be, you mentioned that pressure and that expectation. The question will be how that affects them as they come closer to the title. I mean, we saw in the Brendan Rodgers season with Suarez and Sterling leading them towards the title, when they obviously fell short of the final hurdle. We saw the fans on the street banging on the bus, the absolute wave of emotion that sort of fueled that team. And Jamie Carragher said that helped Liverpool. He said that helps them. But you do wonder sometimes, let's say, for example, they're 1 goal down with 20 minutes to go at home to Crystal Palace, for example. That pressure and that weight of expectation is going to suddenly hit them at one point. And it's how they're going to deal with that. And you imagine that these sorts of tricks will be the sort of thing that helps them regain control and regain composure in the game.
No, that's a good point. Brighton might have gone into this fixture thinking Liverpool were there to be got at, particularly with a makeshift back line. There was no Dejan Lovren, who after starting 7 consecutive games pulled up injured, so in came Fabinho. Conor Dunn wrote about it as well, in terms of the impact that Fabinho had. I mean, he seamlessly slotted in. We were given an insight of that against Wolves earlier in the FA Cup. But even, I suppose, when Virgil van Dijk isn't the man of the match, he still gets credit for those around them and that level of improvement for someone like Fabinho who comes in, because he was marshalling him all over the place. And they look like, to be honest, they've been playing together for years.
Well, Fabinho is clearly a quality player. He's a Brazilian international. He's cost £40 million. But I do think, as we sort of said, I do think that shows the power of Van Dijk. And it's hard. I know he gets a lot of credit, Van Dijk, but it's hard to overstate the impact he's had just on those around him, as well as his own individual performance. And I think that Fabinho showed firsthand what kind of calming presence Van Dijk can be.
And you just look at what Liverpool have done with Van Dijk marshalling them.
Oh yeah, I mean, Liverpool crying out for him, weren't they? He was the missing link, the missing piece of the jigsaw. You'd have to probably say at this point in time that if the vote for Footballer of the Year, Player of the Year was tomorrow,
he'd get your vote, would he?
I think you'd have to go for him because, traditionally, obviously, everybody goes for the strikers, and there are strikers up there, for sure. But if he was to lead Liverpool to the title or really close to it, I think you couldn't ignore him, even though the kind of the popular vote is usually for a striker. He's been fantastic and worth every bit of the money they paid for him.
21 clean sheets, 20 goals conceded. Do you think they've even exceeded their own expectations, or surprised by the effect he's had?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's funny with Van Dijk because everyone could see the problem with centre-back. Everyone could see that. It shows that of all the talk about finding the right value and changing systems and the structure, sometimes it is a matter of he's better than what we have to pay for him. And they simply just went and paid the money they had to pay for him. So obviously it was a lot of money, 75 million, but he's worth every single penny. And I don't think anyone thought he'd be... I mean, he's come on leaps and bounds as an individual player, I think, from the time at Southampton, and he was obviously very good. But he seems to be, as you say, the best player in the league right now.
I'm just surprised nobody went for him when he was at Celtic. Because although he improved in the Premier League because he was playing better football, higher intensity football against better quality players, all his weapons were there to see at Celtic, and Celtic were playing Champions League football at that point. So I'm surprised nobody sort of took the gamble, but fair play to Liverpool, they did.
Looking back now, he was scoring goals for Celtic, running through defences and sort of from 25 yards, taking free kicks. He was just so far and away better than that league. You look at it now and think it's actually not that,
Oh, no.
Of course, he should have come to Premier League and been this good. Of
absolutely. I mean, and we're still really yet to see him get out of second gear. And so, if we look at the fixtures coming up now for Liverpool, because this is a key period for them, and it will be between now and mid-May. The run of fixtures on the whole before Bayern Munich aren't the worst, are they? No. But, do we expect him to get out of second gear in any of these fixtures?
Next 3 fixtures, really winnable games, although I would say that Crystal Palace went to Man City and won, didn't they, before Christmas, but the rest of them, up to that Bayern Munich game you would look at, but look, I think he's absolutely moved into his absolute prime, Van Dijk, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Holland as a nation are also on the up in international football, and it's because of players like Virgil van Dijk.
Yeah, West Ham away strikes me as the sort of game that Liverpool historically would have trouble with. That kind of a team going at them, the crowd being up at them, and sort of attacking players, trying to make a difference. I mean, West Ham will...
But it depends on whether they face Marko Arnautovic or not.
Well, indeed. But even with Felipe Anderson, Sami Nasri, they've got players there, and Pellegrini, he likes to have a go. He's always going to have a go. So that seems to be one out of that list that seems to be the most sort of troubling, I think, for Jurgen.
I would also think they'd be looking at that Man United fixture in the middle of 2 fixtures against Bayern Munich as a problem, because United are quite clearly improved since they last played them, which was obviously Jose Mourinho's last game against Liverpool at Anfield. They lost 3-1. He got sacked the following day. I think that Man United game at Old Trafford, with Manchester United up for stopping Liverpool winning the title or getting ahead of steam up, I think that's going to be a really tough game for them.
I just wonder if Bayern Munich, maybe he rotates the squad a bit, whether he prioritises the league over Champions League. You think it's unlikely for Bayern Munich, especially going back to Germany, for him that'll mean a lot. But you just wonder that Klopp's not afraid to do that. We saw in the FA Cup he made loads of changes. Whether he thinks this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
I think they have to. I think he.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think they would. Listen, I know I get Liverpool's link with the Champions League and the great European nights at Anfield.
But because it's done relatively recently, and this has now been 29 years since
they were in the final last year. I think if you said to Klopp, Champions League or Premier League, it's just not
which is
not an argument.
I mean, if you heard this argument 2 or 3 seasons ago, I mean, everybody would have thought, you'd be.
But I think the fans would go for it as well.
Yeah,
the fans would back him. If you said to the fans, listen, guys, would you mind if we prioritise Man United? They'd be right behind that.
I agree. I think it'd be interesting to see how he copes with that.
And if we've looked at Liverpool's next 6, we have to look at City's next 6 and see what's coming up for them. It's. With them building up this momentum, they've had the goals. They're in a few more competitions, of course. They're still in the EFL Cup and the FA Cup. So what do you think now? If you look at it, actually, you can still see them, scoring for fun as they have done in the last 3, particularly.
I've been thinking about the mentality of whether you want to go first or second on a weekend. And I'm thinking, from Liverpool's point of view or City's point of view, you can imagine it'd be easier to be the front runner going first, because I suppose, for example, Liverpool this weekend, they knew if they beat Brighton they'd extend that gap. So that's if we win, we get a positive. If City go first, City win, suddenly it's Liverpool have to win to avoid a negative, and that whole mentality shifts. And I just wonder whether, when that pressure starts mounting and City start winning and Liverpool play later on that weekend, it's going to change the dynamic a bit.
Yeah, Steve?
Well, when you see those fixtures, it just makes you realise how important winning against Liverpool was a couple of weeks ago at the Etihad, because I don't think there's anything up until kind of February when they play Arsenal, Chelsea, that will worry City, and I think even those 2 games are at home for them. So I think that all of those fixtures are winnable games for City, which again sort of puts the pressure right on Liverpool really to keep on winning, and who's going to blink first.
It's hard to imagine Liverpool being able to drop any points and getting away with it. It seems like every time you look at City, you think, well, they're going to win. They're going to win. Liverpool need to just keep winning. And if there's one slip up, that might be enough to punish them.
And City have the know-how of winning titles, don't they?
They've been there and done it.
All their players have won titles, so whereas Liverpool haven't. So that is a factor you've got to put into the equation.
It's great, isn't it?
Guardiola said after they beat West Ham a few months ago, he said it reminds him of the season, his second season at Barcelona, when I think they finished with 98 points and Madrid had 97 or something around that. That they both got pushed to the absolute limit, and both of them set records for La Liga.
Yeah.
And you wonder if that might be something similar this season, where they both have to go and get something. I mean, City obviously got 100 points last year, and he thinks it might take something similar again this year to win it.
Yeah, and while it pushes them on the edge, we wouldn't have it any other way. Time for another break on the programme. Up next, we'll be discussing whether Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is a keeper after he maintains his 100% start to life in the Old Trafford.